All right, we are live. This is the Measuring What Matters Social 60 Hangout brought to you by Hootsuite. We have an awesome panel of guests here. We have Neil Patel of KISSmetrics, Quick Sprout, Crazy Egg, among other things. We have Tia Kelly from Unbounce. And we have our very own from Hootsuite, Mohamed, Zahid, as well as myself. I'm from Hootsuite. My name is Connor, but I'm not the focus of today. So I'm going to let our awesome panelists quickly introduce themselves. Tia, let's start with yourself.
Okay. Hi guys, thanks for having me. My name's Tia. I'm a social strategist at Unbounce. Unbounce is actually a landing page builder for marketers. So we provide you with the tools you need and a small marketing team if you don't have the time and resources to go back and forth between IT and your designers and you really want to launch your landing pages for your campaigns quickly.
Awesome. And Neil, tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love creating companies for marketers. As you mentioned, I've created KISSmetrics, Crazy Egg, a few others. Typically, the companies I create are usually analytical-based products.
Awesome. And finally, Mo, tell us about yourself.
Cool. Hey guys, I'm Mo. I work on data and analytics at Hootsuite, so mostly just like a lot of number crunching, helping all the business units kind of like work through data problems, and primarily focused on the free and pro product.
Nice, data crunching. Cool, so we're going to get right into it. You can follow along on Twitter as well using the hashtag social6060. If you'd like to tweet any of your questions, we're really going to try to get to some of these at the very end. So tag your questions using hashtag social60. Tweet at all these fine folks on the panel as well, and we'll be sure to answer everything. So we'll get started. We'll lob an easy one here. So why is it important for small businesses to measure social media? I mean, what are they getting out of it, and why should they be on there? It's sort of the age-old question. Neil, why don't we start with you?
You can actually generate business from social media. There's a big misconception out there that social media isn't trackable and you can't generate revenue from it. It's just more so used for branding. But a lot of people are generating revenue from it. I did a blog post, I think yesterday, and it was talking about how there's a site called Timothy Sykes, and we were showing how many leads he was getting from Facebook. But the dude is generating for a small business, right? It's just him. He's generating over 6 figures a year just from Facebook, and he's not spending any money on Facebook ads, right? It just shows that these social media channels can be very valuable, and if you're measuring them, you can figure out where to spend your time and attention.
Wow, that's awesome. 6 figures from Facebook with no ads. That's impressive. Cool. Mo, what about yourself? Why should we be measuring?
Yeah, to add to Neil's point, totally. Social is this amazing channel for growth, and when you look at a lot of the more recent success stories, like even these kind of like online businesses like BuzzFeed and Upworthy and a lot of other companies that have kind of leveraged social and been able to grow, in part it's because they've been able to measure the impact that they have, and one of the main goals is, you know, when you're measuring performance, it's kind of like a feedback loop, and it allows you to figure out like what works and what doesn't, and kind of double down on the things that do work. And social is an amazing channel because it's just really easy to measure a lot of what's working, as opposed to more traditional channels, like maybe like face-to-face or kind of like more traditional marketing. So it's just, you know, it's just an awesome goldmine of data. So it'd be kind of a shame not to take advantage of it.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like a billboard when you drive by. It's like, how do you measure that, you know? Tia, what about yourself? Anything to add?
Yeah, it's definitely important just for the sake of your own business. Like, you need to be able to keep track of how much you're growing. If you started a business and you weren't keeping track of your revenue, it's the same thing. You don't know, you can't kind of like benchmark against yourself to see how much you're improving each year. So something like another reason that's really important, sometimes for smaller teams, I know social media seems pretty mainstream now, but there are actually a ton of small businesses and even huge companies that still don't see the value. So for yourself, if you're working in social media, measurement is important to be showing your value to your own company, to your own boss, so you can kind of show them, hey, look what we've been doing every day. We haven't just been playing around. It's actually making an impact on our business.
Yeah, totally. That's a big struggle for us here at Hootsuite, obviously, is sort of proving the value. Our whole platform is based on that. So it's definitely an uphill battle for some, but yeah, we're excited about it. Cool. So we know why it's important. Let's get into some quick ways that some of these, small, medium-sized businesses, even large businesses who maybe don't know where to start, how can they get started measuring and sort of putting together a bit of a strategy going forward? I'll sort of open it up, anyone who wants to jump in.
Sure, the quickest way to get started is, for the tracking standpoint, set up goal tracking in Google Analytics. It's free, and you can actually see where conversions are happening by source, so whether it's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., right? As for a strategy, if you're a small and medium business starting out, you probably don't have much time, so you should end up focusing on the channel that A, you're most familiar with, and B, is the easiest for you to leverage. So if you already have a lot of Facebook fans and you're already very familiar with it, test it out first, whether it's participating, communing with your fans, or just sharing updates about your business or coupons or whatever it may be. Just go out there and test out a few different updates, status updates, messages, and see what's working for you and what's not.
Hey Neil, you make an interesting point. I just wanted to follow up quickly. What about a business that maybe doesn't have a social presence at all? Would you recommend they still just sort of pick one or two networks to get started, or?
Yeah, in that case, I would just pick one network to get started, build up the presence by, let's say it's Twitter, right? You would add people that you feel would be relevant to your audience. You would start replying people, answering their questions using the search feature when people are typing in stuff related to your business. And you would also post updates related to either A, the city you're doing business in, or B, about the industry your business is about. And over time, you'll actually build up more followers, fans, etc. If you're just starting out and you have no social profiles, the one I would avoid at first is Facebook, because it's the hardest to actually gain followers and fans unless you have a marketing budget. Twitter, Google Plus, and some of the other ones, you don't need any money to actually build up quite a big of an audience.
Awesome. That's a really important point as well. Cool. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Just working with a lot of small businesses early on, I found like one of the biggest complaints from them was that they just didn't have enough time. And I think the reason for that was because they kind of expected that if they just started on social media, they would have to do everything at once. So starting small and kind of seeing what works, and then playing around with that one platform and kind of building off of that would be probably a good approach.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think definitely, like, in terms of social doesn't really need to be super daunting. Like, the two biggest challenges I think in getting started is just getting followers or fans, and then also like knowing kind of what to post. So, as for like the first question, something that I see a lot of people do is kind of just ask their friends to like follow them on Facebook or on Twitter, and that kind of can get the cycle kind of going. And then afterwards, like, you really do need quality content to both engage like your current fans and then kind of grow that audience. And so social is a great place to find content, because if you start following like-minded companies, or just like really cool people or really cool companies on Facebook or on Twitter, you can start to see the kind of content that resonates with people, and that's partially why you would sort of measure that impact and measure like traditional engagement metrics like likes and comments and retweets and stuff. And it's just about like chipping away really at a problem by breaking it up into small chunks and kind of like slowly chipping away at it. So if you have 100 followers, like, how do you get up to 150? How do you get up to 200? And then starting to like get a feel for like what works and what doesn't with your audience.
Right. And Mo, just to follow up quickly, say one of these new businesses, starts a social presence, whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have time to produce their own content. Is it okay for them to just strictly curate content? Can they build a decent following and a loyal following just from curating and engaging?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think being a tastemaker on social is like an excellent way to get started. And like before you can start building out your own content, it's super beneficial to curate kind of like what you think is the best content. And then also in doing that, you start to get a really good feel for what kind of content works, and you start to understand the space a bit better. So I think that's an excellent starting strategy. And even it's a great engagement strategy to fill in those gaps, because you can't be creating content all the time, and at scale for a lot of small businesses, they just don't have time.
Cool. I love it. Anything else to add, guys, or should we move on here?
If we get back to the actual building out your measurement plan, I think what a lot of people do and how the mistake of making is picking a tool first and then building backwards, where you should be determining all your goals and then work towards the different tactics that can help you achieve those goals. So really just like find out where you fit. For us in marketing at Unbounce, we're actually part of the life cycle where there are 3 kind of stages that we address. So there's the people who are problem unaware, people who are problem aware, and people who are solution and product aware. And where we come in is that like social is more at the top of the funnel. So we're kind of addressing those people, getting them interested in our content, and then I'll kind of push them to the blog content where hopefully they'll sign up for our blog and then be that interested in our content that it makes them interested in our product, and then eventually hopefully they'll lead to a sign up for Unbounce. So for that, that's our goal. So my KPIs are kind of like working towards getting people through the top of the funnel. So I focus more on things like engagement and social referral traffic to the blog. Then you kind of build a budget and a plan that works with that budget, and always be testing the things that you're doing and just be open to changing it up, because social changes all the time. So the plan that you have at the beginning of the year might not be the same plan you have at the end of the year.
Awesome. That's a really important point to keep in mind. Always adjusting, because you never know what's going to work. We, at Hootsuite as well, we're always experimenting with different things. And even if things bomb, if things don't work, we sort of readjust and sort of learn from it. Cool, so we'll move along. Tia, you talked a little bit about sort of metrics, KPIs. So, what are the main social metrics and KPIs that some of these new businesses or existing businesses should really focus on? And where should they start with KPIs?
I think this one's a tough one, because I think every business has a different goal. Like Neil mentioned, you can totally track the revenue that you're making through social media, but not everyone has that goal in their department. Like I just said, for us, for marketing, that's not where social fits in. That's kind of a little bit lower down the funnel. So for me, my main metrics are, I know follower count is not as important these days as it was early on, but it's still something that we keep track of just so we can see how much we're growing each year. I do focus a lot more on engagement and interactions and just how much people are engaging with everything that I'm posting on all the networks. And then, like I mentioned, social referral traffic. So my job is to get people to the blog, and then it's up to the content team to make them stay.
Good point. It's up to the content team. Cool. Neil, what about you? What do you think? Where should people start with KPIs and metrics and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, as a business, you got to figure out what's important from you and then go from there. Whether it's reviews, engagement, followers, revenue, you need to decide as a business what you want to end up tracking. It's going to be quite a bit different for national-based businesses as well as local-based ones. But once you determine that, you can go from there.
Totally, and I'd add to that as well. Like, I think the way that you approach social and just like digital channels in general, there's like kind of like one separating criteria is whether you're an online to online business or an online to offline business. So are you driving traffic to a website where the conversion will take place, like an e-commerce or a subscription-based business, or which is like like all of our businesses that we kind of work on, or are you kind of more of an online to offline? So online is like one of your channels to acquire customers, or to engage customers or retain customers, and then actually the transaction or the business interaction happens offline. So like a food truck or like a pet store or a clothing store, or if you're like a band and you're trying to get people to a concert, that's going to be kind of a very different business problem. And so I think it's difficult to set KPIs before you, like Tia and Neil kind of said, like you want to set your goal first, like a really high level kind of true north goal, like one goal which is like 1,000 people coming to your food truck every week, and then kind of work backwards from there and sort to think like, what would I need to do to get 1,000 people at my food truck? I probably need 10,000 followers and convert 10% of them in a given week, and I need to have X number of posts. And that's kind of where the measurement comes in, is you start to get a feel for what your conversion metrics are throughout that funnel, like all the steps to get to that kind of endpoint. So if you have 10 posts and each post gets you 100 customers, then you'd need to do 10 posts. And then maybe you could test 15 posts, but that might not get you 150 customers. And then you'll start to see how the various steps of the funnel kind of interact with each other.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, so I mean, do you want to maybe flush a bit about the conversion metrics, Mo, just for maybe some of the audience that's not too familiar with what that is?
Oh yeah, totally. So it's almost kind of like a story that you're kind of abstracting into a couple of key numbers, but the idea, you could take like an awareness one, and then engagement, and then conversion. So a lot of businesses, people need to find out about them first, and they might not actually use the service or convert upon hearing about it. So you hear about a cool business because they had a great blog post, or they had an interesting tweet, or your friend followed them on Facebook, so you saw them on a newsfeed, and you're kind of like, I've never heard of these guys before, like a food truck, and you're like, they look kind of interesting. And then you go back to whatever you're doing that day, and then you might see them again or a third time on another channel, and then now you're starting to recognize them more. Maybe you follow them on Twitter, you start seeing a tweet from them, and so that's kind of you kind of have these like funnel steps, where you have like awareness, engagement, conversion, for example, or you can just have much more concrete funnel steps. Like my goal is to get people to follow the Facebook page, then they start seeing the posts. Hopefully, a certain percentage of them will interact with the posts. A certain percentage of people who interact with the posts make it to the website. A certain percentage of people who make it to the website will then sign up for the newsletter, for example, which I know is like kind of like what Tia was sort of describing in her strategy, where you get people to sign up for some sort of a mailing list where you can engage with them, and then a certain percentage of people on the mailing list will then actually become your customers, and then hopefully you can retain a certain percentage, and so on and so forth.
Right. Awesome.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Tia. That's actually an excellent slide share.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So, so for everyone online, we're going to tweet out a link here to a visual representation of what Mo just so eloquently explained here. We're going to tweet that out. It's on the Moz blog, but we'll make sure you guys find that. Okay, cool. So moving along, we're sort of talking about KPIs, metrics. We sort of touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can flesh it out a little more. And this is sort of the question of ROI. Everyone talks about social and ROI, real hot button topic. So how do you tie back these metrics and KPIs to ROI, and whether this is leads, revenue, sales, whatever. So how do we tie this back? Neil, why don't we start with you?
I'm a big believer that any channel you use in marketing has to be tied back to revenue. Whether it's an indirect or direct conversion, revenue is revenue. If the business isn't making enough of it, it's not going to be around for long. So what we do, whether it's someone coming and setting up for a newsletter or whatever, maybe, and then converting it to customer later on, we still look at the first source and the last source, someone came before they converted, and we always attribute that to revenue. If something has positive revenue, great, we keep doing more of it. If it doesn't, we either A, fine-tune it so it's profitable, or B, we put it on the sidelines and come back to it later when we have more time.
Awesome. Anyone else? Tia, what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. So if we're talking about, say we're launching a new campaign and it's an ebook. What we'll do is we'll build the landing page, obviously, for the ebook, and then we're going to tag all the links that I'm putting out through social so that we know where the source is coming from. What we do then is we actually have a value placed on each lead that Corey, our marketing manager, has determined with our customer success team. So as far as revenue goes, anytime that someone comes in from social, lands on that landing page, signs up to download the ebook, and becomes a new lead, then we can actually tie back the value of that lead.
Interesting. And are you guys using Google Analytics for this, or how are you?
Yeah, we kind of use a mix of things. We use Google Analytics. We actually do use KISSmetrics. Corey's probably the better one to talk about like the money stuff. Like I said, I kind of focus more on the top of the funnel, get them through, and then pass it over to those guys.
Awesome. Mo, what about you? Anything to add? No.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Neil and Tia pretty much covered most of it, but I think, yeah, there's definitely an importance in being really concrete about the goal and kind of like how social activity ties into that goal. A lot of what we do on the marketing team at Hootsuite is very kind of hypothesis driven, where we think there are certain relationships that exist, and then we'll go out and kind of test that in the field. And so, going back to my earlier example with like tying back ROI to social and kind of that, and looking at that funnel, if you're trying to drive traffic to a page, and you know kind of at what rate that converts at, you start to understand what amount of social activity you need to generate that traffic, in addition to your other channels. And so there you can start to get a good feel for the ROI of social. I think a lot of businesses, they kind of have like a karma approach to social, where they're like, if we do nice things on social, it'll like magically translate to like business metrics like revenue and customers. And I think it's just about being really proactive and thinking about what that relationship might look like, and then going out in the field, testing some ideas, measuring it, and then seeing if that actually holds true. If that makes sense, if that wasn't like too abstract.
Yeah, it was good. Is there any like quick example you could give us that we've done here at Hootsuite that comes to mind?
Yeah, totally. So we do a lot of content marketing, a lot of driving traffic to the blog, white papers, and so social is like one of our highest performing channels to make that happen. So we have a lot of followers on the Twitter page, so when we tweet out links for our white papers, we do a lot of campaign tagging with Google Analytics, and we know exactly how many of those downloads came from which tweets or which Facebook posts and which ones performed, and then that allows us to kind of iterate and figure out what types of tweets work, what types of Facebook posts work, and what's the best time of day to post, as well as even just what types of content resonate with people, because once you get them to the page, you have another conversion metric, because which is I think like why Tia was mentioning earlier, like stuff like followers and likes and comments and retweets aren't as important as they used to be, and I think that's only because before they were almost kind of the be-all end-all, and I would consider them a necessary but not sufficient condition. So without followers, there's no audience to talk to, but that alone is not going to grow your business, and so you need to make sure that there's no leakages really at any part of the funnel, and so that's kind of where tracking kind of comes into play.
Awesome. Cool. I think that's going to help everybody a lot here. Okay, so we talked earlier a little bit about limited time, bandwidth, budgets, all that stuff being huge pain points for every business, especially small to medium-sized businesses. So with that, what's your advice on helping some of these businesses that maybe a business with 2 people that don't have time to really measure any of this, but they're interested in sort of the bare bones of how they can get started and get the most bang for their buck measuring. Where should they get started, and sort of what should they do? I think we've covered it a bit, but I'd like to sort of explain it a little more to some of the people in the audience here. Neil, what do you think?
The big problem with small and medium businesses, a lot of them want to do everything, and it just doesn't make sense. You're not generating a lot of traffic, revenue, business, whatever it may be from these social channels, or you're just starting it out. What's the point of spending more money to figure out if it's working or not, right, from a tracking perspective? It's too early to actually determine if it's going to work for you. A lot of times with these campaigns, it takes 6+ months. If I was a small business, I would just use Google Analytics. Whatever tracking is in there, great. Whatever's not, that's fine. It's a free tool. And just go out there and start leveraging these profiles. Don't worry about tracking until you're much larger.
Awesome. The Google Analytics is definitely the place to get started. Tia, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say you don't necessarily need to ignore tracking altogether from the beginning. Like, I think you could just kind of focus on one thing that you decide fits with your goals. That's the most important. So even if you can only focus on that one metric at a time, at least you have some kind of benchmark moving forward. Otherwise, if like for an example, I came on last October, we've been tracking follower growth, but like if just looking at the numbers this week, if I hadn't had the last 2 years to compare to, I wouldn't know, like, am I growing fast enough right now? or am I tanking right now? So it's kind of nice. I'd also kind of say, don't be afraid to kind of piece together a bunch of tools. I know a lot of people will try to look for kind of a all-in-one tool that does everything, and usually for a small business it's not really in the budget. So even here we kind of piece together all sorts of different tools to make it work budget-wise. Even just spreadsheets. Keep track of stuff in spreadsheets if you have to. Like Connor, I remember going to a presentation you guys did, and I was like totally thought we were so far behind and had no idea what we were doing. And then I went to the Hootsuite talk, and they're like, we use spreadsheets to keep track of stuff, and I was like, yes.
Yeah, big time.
That's what I do too. So I'm just gonna share a post right here from our blog. Actually, Danielle Prager wrote it, and it's kind of like how to get started with measuring your social media marketing.
Cool.
So there's kind of a start. It gives you a few tool options and kind of the different metrics you should be looking at, or at least thinking about looking at if you're not at that point yet.
Cool. You mentioned sort of patchworking together with some different tools. Do you maybe just want to mention those quickly for some people?
Yeah, we're huge fans of Buffer for like the day-to-day stuff. We do use Sprout Social. I know. I think we need to sit down and have a talk.
Yeah.
I did try to use Hootsuite early on, and it just didn't work for me before at the time, and we were just kind of already doing this stuff when I came on. So we are always looking for options. I know you guys have an awesome plan for low-budget teams.
We'll fix that after this.
For sure. And then yeah, we use things like I actually do a lot of stuff natively in app, which is kind of surprising to some people, but I just prefer it. If you can do it, but I know a lot of times I do schedule stuff ahead of time still, but I really prefer to just be on Facebook and be on Twitter whenever I can.
Yeah, I'd agree with Facebook. You know, with some API limitations, like you can't tag other people with some third-party apps and stuff, which is a bit frustrating. So I definitely agree there. But yeah, no, it's cool to figure out what everyone's using and stuff.
Actually, one more thing that we do use for some of our tracking, like competitor-wise and stuff, is Rival IQ, and that's actually Danielle Prager who wrote that blog post that I just shared.
Oh, awesome. Cool. So I've been looking at the Social 60 hashtag. Everyone's tweeting up a storm. I think people are loving the content so far. We had a quick question from the audience. Neil, some people were wondering, so it's about Google Analytics. Someone was wondering if you could just explain a little bit further how you can use it to sort of get started with analyzing your social media. So things like, referral traffic from social, stuff like that. Is there any sort of link or anything you want to point them to, or do you want to sort of go through it quickly? Or
I believe Moz has a guide called the Beginner's Guide to Social Media. I don't know the URL off the top of my head. Nonetheless, I don't know if it covers tracking or not. But just look at referrer traffic. You can sort it by Facebook, Twitter, etc. And then from there, if you set up goals, you can actually see which ones are causing conversion. But that's the most simplistic way to get started with social, and that's how we start tracking from the beginning. It's usually good enough from there. You could track other things like followers or whatever you want, or tweets or engagements. I myself don't do a lot of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of free tools that will track your history, so that way you don't have to manually do it.
Awesome. Interesting. Okay, anything to add on Google Analytics before we we have another question from the audience we can get to as well.
Just adding to the kind of Google Analytics point, and that works really well for businesses that have a website, or especially like online to online businesses where Google Analytics is kind of sort of like an amazing tool for figuring out web traffic and performance. For a lot of online to offline businesses, you can go really low tech, and when it comes to data, you don't always need it to be super precise and super accurate. A really good proxy that I think a lot of small businesses can use is just kind of asking customers how they found out about the business. And a lot of time, you'll probably hear that it's social media, word of mouth, and then you can start to get a feel for the impact of your social campaigns. Like if you're asking people in January, and most people are saying word of mouth, or they're saying that they heard about it through a friend, and then you start doing social campaigns, and then 3 months later, most people are kind of mentioning your Instagram or mentioning your Facebook account and saying like, oh, like you guys post really cool pictures on Instagram, and like if you're a bakery and you kind of engage people through that, you can start to get a good feel for how your social's performing. It's obviously not as accurate, but it can start to give you a pretty good idea, especially as a small business. It's very, very hard to track online to offline conversions. So just talking to customers is a really good way to get a feel for that.
Interesting. So you mentioned tracking online to offline conversions and Instagram. There's an interesting local business here that comes to mind. They're actually our neighbors here at Hootsuite. They're called 33 Acres. They're a new brewery. I think they're a really good example because they're amazing on Instagram. But I've always thought, like, how do you tie that back to, a brick and mortar business? Does anyone have anything to add on like Instagram, sort of the value of Instagram, how you can measure it? Anything there?
I'd agree. The hardest thing with Instagram is there's no links. So it's harder to track that way. But I agree with Mo, like talk to your customers. If you set things up specifically as campaigns, I had a good example from Facebook that would also work on Instagram, was a small outdoor apparel retailer from where I'm from in Prince George. Actually, they pretty much started their business on Facebook before it was even open and kind of got the hype up. And what they did was they offered discounts to people, 20% off on if you come in and say you read this on Facebook. So you could do the same thing with Instagram, I think. It would work especially well for grand openings or for promotions, like holiday promotions, that kind of thing. So you just say, hey, I saw the post you put on Instagram and said that I could get 20% off if I came in. So. Right.
The problem with Instagram is I was doing analysis to figure out what profiles are popular and why they're popular. And I was looking at a lot of my friends' profiles, and some of these girls have like 100, 500,000 followers. And I started analyzing, and I realized there's a trend. People who pretty much post half-naked pictures on people who don't, or if you're a guy, you're not going to get as many followers. And even the guys, the ones who do get a lot of followers, do crazy stuff. For example, this past weekend, my buddy threw a party. And he had at this guy's house named Dan Blitzerian, who's popular on Instagram. He had mermaids kissing mermaids at his parties, and like all this kind of stuff for his 30th or 32nd birthday or whatever it was. And I was looking at it. It's very hard to actually do this for a business. And we've tried this for a few businesses, but it doesn't work unless you tie it to either girls who are pretty much half naked, which I myself wouldn't want my business associated with. You're not going to end up doing well. And we've tested it out in which if you can get these people to mention you on a consistent basis for your business, you'll notice a spike on Google Trends in which more and more people will start searching for your business. It takes roughly 5 to 6 months before you see that spike in Google Trends. But if you get a lot of people with popular profiles to talk about you, you're going to get a ton of followers. But it's not going to be the type of interactions or branding that you're going to want, right? So I myself would avoid it.
Yeah.
After you, Tia.
I think there are certain industries that Instagram works really well for, especially like consumer goods and luxury brands, that type of stuff, where you need a celebrity endorser or your product shows really well. But for B2B, I think it's tougher. Like, how do you show a really good picture of a landing page builder on Instagram? We use it more for kind of culture and recruitment type purposes, so people can, like when we're hiring, we'll say, hey, check out our Instagram, check out what it's like to work at Unbounce. We don't usually, Instagram isn't a huge one for us business-wise, I would say.
Yeah, I just totally to second Tia's point, that's pretty much, kind of the example that Neil gave was like basically a very extreme example that just some businesses work well visually and others not as much. So at Hootsuite, very much like Unbounce, we use Instagram as kind of a culture recruitment tool. It's great for that side of the business, whereas a lot of our neighbors in Vancouver, so Herschel, 33 Acres, Aritzia, these are consumer goods companies, or they have just products that show really well and it kind of ties into their culture. They kill it on Instagram, and so it's really good for their business. But it's definitely a lot more challenging for something like a B2B business or like a bank. Those are tougher businesses that they're more suited to, like, I think, text and video content than visual content like pictures.
Right. Yeah, totally. Tia, you did mention there's no links. I have seen some brands, mention that you can read more by linking what's in the profile. So you do get one link. Kind of interesting. I don't know if brands are really tracking. I'm sure they are tracking this, but have you guys seen any creative examples of brands sort of linking through their profile and having it actually work properly?
No, I just check it out on my profile, and it's usually go to the blog. It's more like lifestyle blogger. I kind of like it on my Instagram, to be honest. I like not having links for me personally, but for work, obviously not as much.
Yeah, I've tracked it myself. Like, I've added Bitly links and different types of things. I think I have like 50 or 60 or 70,000 followers. I've only posted like 10 pictures in my whole life on Instagram, and they're silly pictures like, I had tomato soup and cereal. I ran out of milk, and I ran out of crackers, so I just mixed them and I ate it, right? And I posted a picture. And you get like likes and hundreds of comments or whatever it may be, but I never saw ROI. I've tried posting business pictures in the past, and I just deleted them because they don't get much engagement. But when I post stupid things like, here's a picture of my socks, I get 1,000 likes, or like, here's a picture of the Ted teddy bear that talks. It got like 3,000-4,000 likes or whatever it was, but the numbers just don't make sense for B2B. Even when I track the links, you just don't get volume or enough traffic where it makes sense to spend that time on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, or any of the other profiles. If you have a clothing company or something that's really consumer-based that appeals to girls, or mainly I would say girls, then you're probably going to do well, but if not, I don't see you doing well.
Interesting. Cool, so we have another question from the audience. This is from someone named Deborah. I couldn't pronounce her Twitter handle, but I looked up her first name. Okay, so I'll open this up to anybody. What would you say to someone who says, social hasn't generated any leads for me and it has no value for my business?
I would say that's very possible. I think it happens a lot. I think it happens quite often, probably for two reasons. One is, the great example that kind of Neil gave about Instagram. Like, not every channel works for everyone. And then the other one is, it's really, you kind of get what you put into it. So, like we were talking about earlier, like if the content isn't there, if you don't have a lot of followers, people aren't engaging, if you don't even have those early parts of the funnel, you shouldn't be expecting the later parts to kind of magically appear. So I think it happens all the time, but I wouldn't limit it to social. I think you could pretty much just like a Mad Libs, like place any single marketing channel and be like, billboards have no value for me, TV has no value for me, radio has no value for me. Yeah, it's all about execution, and also, is it something that your audience is in?
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyone else want to jump in there?
Sure. So if you have a company like Palantir, the Peter Thiel company that does government-based contracts, social is not going to convert for you. Why? Because your money is all based on a few government contracts and consumers aren't buying from you. So in that aspect, social is a waste of time if you're looking for revenue. If you're using it for recruiting tools like Unbounce, by all means, go ahead and do it. If you have a few thousand visitors plus from social on a monthly basis and you're not able to generate any conversions or sales or revenue from it, that means you probably aren't the best at conversion optimization. You need to fine-tune your funnel from your offering, your landing page, how you're collecting leads, etc. If you don't have at least a few thousand visitors and social is a viable channel for you, you can't expect conversions right away. You need to focus on building up your profiles and generating more traffic from it first.
Yeah, I could say the other point would just be maybe they're not tracking it properly. They could be getting leads and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, we have another quick question here. We might have time for one or two more. From Twitter, this is from, I think his name's Louise. So when do you know a social strategy is worth continuing, and how do you determine based on the data gathered? So maybe like when, how long would you put into like a certain strategy when you're measuring it? Neil, you mentioned Google Trends takes upwards of 6 months. Is that how long you'd stick into trying something, or? No,
usually with social it's much quicker. I'm able to figure out if there's a positive ROI within a few months. I look at growth rate on a weekly basis. If I can keep growing, at a, let's say, steady rate, 5, 10%, whatever it may be when I'm just starting off. If the campaigns are close to profitable or losing a bit of money, but I can see with volume how it could be profitable if I can tweak conversion rates by 10, 20% and make it profitable. If I need to tweak it by double or triple, usually it's going to be a much tougher campaign to become profitable from a conversion standpoint. But the way I look at it is if I can make it grow fast, and if it's profitable or close to profitable, usually off by 20 to 30% max, I'll keep doubling down on it and make it grow until I can figure out how to make it profitable.
Interesting. Cool. Anything else to add here, Mo or Tia?
Yeah, I think totally agree with Neil. It's social is a much faster channel. You should be able to see like a very statistically significant, without using that kind of technical term, like if on average you get like 5 likes per post and something gets like 50 likes, like something is happening there. Then you need to kind of dive in deeper, but generally when something's working and when it isn't. And similar with kind of the business metrics, you'll know whether it's online to offline, like everyone will be talking to you about your Instagram or your Facebook page or how funny your Twitter profile is, or you'll just be seeing like a ton of inbound traffic on Google Analytics and conversion metrics. So generally when something works, like it's pretty clear in the data, but that's why the data is so essential, is just looking at those numbers, especially on a regular basis, you can identify when the trend has changed, right? When the growth curve has kind of like changed its incline, or when you've seen like a peak in conversions, you'll be able to see that in the data. The why is a much more challenging question.
Yeah, totally agree. Cool. So so we'll make this the last question, and I think this is kind of interesting. We talked a little bit about it beforehand. Here's another one from the audience. It's from RS Boutique. This is kind of cool. They're from Cleveland, Ohio. They have 3,600 followers on Twitter, so not bad for a small business. And their question is, any ideas on how to develop content for a very small business where content takes time away from business functions? So we talked a little bit about this before, but yeah, maybe we'll just jump into a bit of content here for the last couple minutes.
Yeah, so going back to this, like I said, in small businesses, the #1 complaint is time. And obviously they don't want to take time away from sales, but really it's contributing. So 2 things that I used to say were, you can find, especially since she's a boutique, or he, sorry, find someone in your organization that wants to do social. Find the people on the floor. It might even be if the business owner doesn't have time, that doesn't mean the salespeople can't be trained to interact with customers, show the product while they're sitting on the floor cleaning up. In a few spare moments, maybe snap a picture of a dress that's hanging on the rack. I don't know. I see it happening all the time. Another option is get the content from your customers. So invite them to share their pictures with you that you can be using for content. Invite them to share their stories about your products, and just kind of like engage them and make them your content creators.
That's an awesome one. That's what Lululemon and Herschel do.
Yeah.
Is they just get all of their customers to take thousands of pictures, and then they have this amazing like bank of pictures, and they can kind of pick the best ones, and they all look unbelievable, like super professional, because a lot of people are professional photographers and just happen to be Herschel or Lululemon fans and happen to be traveling in like Peru or somewhere crazy. And so as a result, like I follow both their Instagrams, and it's definitely some of my favorite content on Instagram are these 2 brands who just have unbelievable content marketing. So yeah, crowdsourcing, totally curating, like we talked about earlier. Those are really quick, easy strategies.
Yeah, and you can also just go to jobs.problogger.com or .net. I believe it's .net. And for $100 you can post a job posting looking for a blogger. They'll probably write better than you.
There you go.
That's the post, and they'll create the content for you and publish it and promote it, etc.
Not a bad idea. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Mo, because I always figured these like lifestyle brands, clothing apparel brands, even like outdoor tourism brands. It's sort of like feel like their content marketing is sort of like fishing with dynamite. It's like, okay, just take a pretty picture,
Yeah.
post it up here, a little bit of filler, a little bit of text, and you're good to go. So I definitely kind of get a little jealous looking over at what they can do versus online businesses and stuff. But we have it pretty good as well here at Hootsuite, so I shouldn't complain too much. So yeah, with that, I think we're gonna wrap things up here. I really want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank our panelists, Tia Kelly from Unbounce, Neil Patel of KISSmetrics, Crazy Egg, Quick Sprout, among others, and our very own Mohamed Zahid from Hootsuite. If you guys have any parting words or words of wisdom on measurement, let me know now. If you want to add any one-liners for forever moderation?
I'm good on my end. Just go do it, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Totally. Don't be scared.
Yeah, I think it does take a lot of hard work and kind of sweat equity. So I think for a lot of people who don't succeed, sometimes there's a time to just throw in the towel. But I think like in general, like social is something you kind of have to like really work hard at to sort of build that follower base, build the engagement, and then you see the returns. Like it's very front-loaded work. So I would say if you don't see results early on, don't get discouraged. It does take time.
Totally. I'll hop on Twitter, and anybody can just tweet me anytime if you have any questions. I'm gonna post some of those links I was talking about and links that I think are helpful, and I'll do the same thing on the Google Plus event page too.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So if you guys have any other questions online, you can tweet these three awesome people, and I'm sure they'd love to answer them. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for everyone on Twitter using the hashtag Social60. And yeah, special thanks to our panelists. This was awesome.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.